using the power of Excel to help with cutting a budget. I'm Mary Reeder, a member of the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our presenter is Karen R. Harker, who is the Collection Assessment Librarian at the University of North Texas. She has more than 20 years of experience in public, academic, and medical libraries, in which she has worked analyzing systems, evaluating processes, managing research data sets, performing statistical analyses, and using qualitative and quantitative techniques to analyze collection strengths and weaknesses. Karen is a member of the ALCTS and the Texas Library Association. Her presentation today will show ways to use Excel spreadsheet functions and features to compile, organize, and evaluate data for many purposes, not the least of which is planning with a reduced budget. Content covered will include Excel and other spreadsheets, usage data, and data downloaded from an integrated library system. A few things to keep in mind for today's presentation. This webinar does not have interactive chat capabilities. If you wish to comment on today's presentation using Twitter, you may use the hashtag you see on the screen, hashtag ALCTSCE. We will not be monitoring the Twitter feed, however. If you have questions for Karen, please type them into the question box on your screen, and she'll answer them as time permits throughout her presentation. Questions which remain unanswered while we're on the air will be answered offline, and the answers sent to all attendees. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive an email with links to the recording, the presentation slides, and an evaluation within 2 days. Please do take the time to fill out the evaluation form, since it will be used by the Continuing Education Committee to plan future events. There may be a slight delay as I turn the presentation over to Karen.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy you are all here today, and I look forward to sharing with you ways of using Excel more effectively, specifically for evaluating resources. And first, a little bit about me. As was that Mary or Julie? I think Mary said that I have over 20 years of experience in using office technologies for library assessment sort of things. I also have a master's in public health and did a couple of years as biostatistician for clinical trials. So my point in all that is that I've got a fairly good grip of what Excel can and cannot do, and I hope that gives you a little more confidence in what I tell you on this. I did want to share a little bit about you. They sent me the registration, so of course any good presentation on I wanted to check and make sure. Can you see the slides? And I apologize, I should have set this up. There. There we go. The registrants. You are quite varied. We have a nice variety of people. I particularly am impressed with the number of public library people attending. And because that's something I think, it's a group of people that I don't usually see at assessment kind of presentations and webinars. And you're all around the country, although mostly on the East Coast. I find that interesting. And we have somebody from Harasowitz in Germany, so that's nice to see. So now today, I wanted to start our first poll. If you could please start the first poll that will ask you to assess your Excel skills. So please just choose one and let me know what you think your Excel skills are. And in the meantime, I'll also talk about what we're going to be doing. And my main goal here is for you to learn how to take advantage of Excel's features and functions. Specifically, we're going to look at functions that organize your data, help you rank items, so make it easier to decide, select, and deselect, for visualizing the information, and also a little bit about a new method that we started using to evaluate these e-journal packages or big deals. And so now I hope you've had enough time to complete the poll. And so if you could show the poll result, close the poll and show the results. And I'm curious, how can I see the results? I just see my slides. Okay. So yeah, what are the results? I can't see them. 80% intermediate. Okay, so 87% intermediate and 7 novice and 7 advanced, which is pretty much what I had hoped it would be. And because this presentation is geared mainly to people with intermediate and advanced understanding of Excel. However, I will touch upon some of the basics so that those who are novice won't be too overwhelmed, but hopefully those more advanced won't be too bored. And I will pause occasionally for questions, although there will be time in the end for question and answer. The next poll is one that you may not need to fill out if you have been in the lucky position where you have not had to cut resources due to funding issues, but I think most of us who are taking this, who are joining us today, have indeed done that. So if you could select the criteria that you have used, you can select more than one. Thank you for enabling the poll. And you can let me know what criteria you have used. I wanted to put 8 options, but I was told there's a limit of 5, so I had to sort of smush down the list. Our latest budget cut, we knew it was coming, so we spent about 6 months on this. And this is the 4th major budget cut we've had in the last, actually about the 3rd cut in the last 4 years. This time we knew the cuts were going to hurt. The other cuts, we were able to get rid of a lot of fat, a lot of duplicates, a lot of print that we didn't need, and that sort of thing. Now we knew anything we cut was going to be fought. And so we knew we had to make decisions based on evidence of value. So the criteria we selected were price, use, cost per use, the Pareto number, which I'll talk about having to do with distribution of usage across a package, as well as inflation and our librarians' ratings. Now, because this is only an hour, I don't really have time to talk about how we use the other 2, but we will talk about integrating price, use, and cost per use, as well as the distribution of usage. Okay, so if you could close the poll, and I'd like to see what the results are. I'm just curious. I imagine that most of you have used most of these criteria at some point. And again, I can't see the results, so I'll have to rely on Eva to provide me with the responses. While she's doing that, I'll move on and talk about our data. Our usage data, we used, rather than just 1 year, we used a 3-year average of annual usage. This allowed us to take into account fluctuations in curriculum and research interests and that sort of thing. In addition, we wanted to use the highest and best measure of usage. Okay, thank you, Eva. Almost all of you used usage, cost, and cost per use, and inflation, about over half, almost half. Opinions, very popular, and 11% other. Gee, I sure would like to know what those others are, so maybe we'll be able to look at the chat if you want to plug those in. I can see what the chat is later on. So going back to usage, there is some debate as to which usage measure is best to use when comparing resources. A lot of people just tend to use the least common denominator, but for the most part, the least common denominator is the sessions. Sessions mean very little, provide very little information. So we realized that we wanted to use the measure of usage that was closest to the output of each resource type. So I apologize. Let me hide these. I didn't know you could see them. Okay, now they're out of the way. And that is associated with what the database, what the resource provides. I'll talk about those in just a second. But the Pareto distribution is one where we can look at the equity of distribution of usage across titles in a package. You might recognize this as the 80-20 rule, 80% of usage from 20% of the titles. And it's the comparison of the second number that can really be used to compare packages. The highest and best uses depends on the type of resource. So for journals, we used full text downloads, and for packages, we used the distribution of usage across titles. And for literature databases and full text databases, we used abstracts as well as full text downloads. So, okay, it's better, and now I'm making it worse. Okay, so the data sources we used primarily for this come from essentially two basic sources: our integrated library system and our usage reports. Our ILS is III Sierra, and because we use the ERM, we can get the bibliographic information. And we needed some way to link all our reports, all our spreadsheets together easily. And so we used the order record number as our key identifier. This could be something different depending on your own systems, but this is what we used. And of course, for our usage, we use the JR1 and the DB1s. The revision of counter revision 4 came out in the middle of last year, so we didn't use those reports for the media. So we, both these systems you can now export it into Excel, or at the very least CSV, which is comma-separated value files. So that provides the basic background to what data we were going to use. And before I get into how to link all those together, I wanted to make sure everybody had an understanding of functions. Functions are what are the best feature of Excel. They make Excel do all the work. Functions are like mini programs that return some kind of value. You can identify a function easily in Excel because they always begin with an equal sign. Then they're followed by some sort of tag or label. This is just the name of the function. And then inputs or parameters, which are enclosed in parentheses and separated by commas. A simple example here is the sum. Sum, equal sign, sum, and then the range of cell references. In this case, it's going to add all the values of all the cells between E2 and E10. If you're not familiar with the dollar signs, what that means is don't change that particular column and that particular cell reference, row reference, when you copy and paste down a row. If I were to copy this function and put it in the row below, the function would then read sum E2 to E11. And the next row would be sum E2 to E12. So that's briefly why the dollar signs versus the no dollar signs. And very often, order matters when it comes to the inputs or parameters. Each parameter has a different meaning. For this presentation, I'll be talking about two key functions, VLOOKUP, which looks something up, and %rank, which is useful for seeing the distribution of values. VLOOKUP. Well, what does it do? Well, for one thing, V is for vertical. It looks down. I know it says look up, but it does look down the first column of a list for a specific value, then returns the value of a specific column in that row. And this is how you can link lists by a single identifier, ID number. So we have a master list that has an ID, titles, and prices of our resources. And then we have other lists that are specific, like lists of e-journals, lists of databases, that also start with the ID number. We can then view the title and the price from the master list. Then we add resources, add to the resource type list, usage, inflation, ratings. Those can then be seen in the master list. So it's like a big giant loop. So this may look like a lot of gobbledygook to those who aren't used to viewing functions in Excel. But you see the equal sign and the tag, function tag, and then the first parameter is the lookup value. The second parameter is the table array, which includes the file or worksheet name, followed by the cell range. The third parameter is the column index number, and the fourth parameter is range lookup. Now I'll describe these in detail in the next slide. But that's the VLOOKUP function decoded. Now more details about what each parameters are. The lookup value is what you are looking up, the value of what you are looking up. This is usually a cell reference, such as the first cell in this row. The lookup range is where you were looking it up in. Where is that value that you're looking it up? This is the range that has the data you need. The third parameter is the column index number. This is the what you want returned. This is a column number. Note that these are column numbers, not letters. So rather than saying, I want B, you got to give it a number, A, B, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a little irritating. I got used to knowing what the numbers were. I'm hearing an echo. Why do I hear an echo? The fourth parameter is range lookup. And this is how precise you want to be. This is just a true-false, and the default is true, meaning approximate match is okay. But in my case, I almost always say false. I want only exact matches. So in all these examples, it's always false. So those are the general, those are the parameters. So let's look at a very simple example. Here's a table I stole from Microsoft Access. You'll see this in their examples. It has employee ID, department, and name. We want to look up an ID, number 39, and return the name. So the lookup value is 39. The lookup range is the table. And the column number we want to return is 3, which is column C. And then the range lookup is false. And we will get Soror Fatima. Pretty basic. So here are some challenges. So I'm going to open up the question box here. Oops, I better not. You won't be able to see it. I'll give you all time to look at these. What do these VLOOKUP functions return? So this one is VLOOKUP 42 in A1 to C10, column 2, and exact match only. What would this return? Let's see if I can open up my questions box. So if somebody wants to turn on, enter something on the questions, enter their answer on the questions. Operations, yes, Sasha Uni and April Davies, yes. Let's see. Oops, I jumped ahead. Operations, 42, column 2. Okay, let's try this one. There, you should still be able to see it now. Now, this just lets you know that case does not matter when it comes to the function names. So what would this return? And again, you can type it in the questions box. All right, Asha's on top of everything. Yes, Yossi Banai, 35. All right, Lois got it right too. Okay, let's see if we can share this. Let me move my box up here. Okay, this one's a bit of a challenge because this introduces another concept, and that is a concatenation. Now, all concatenation is sticking things together, and the little ampersand is our concatenator, which means it takes the value of this function, tacks on, comma, space, and then tacks on the value of this function and returns it all in one fell swoop. So what would this return? Let's see if Asha can be the first one that, again, third in a row. Yes, Asha got it right. All right. Yes, and Lois also got it in that, yes, it does, but it adds the comma and the space in between. So that's the difference. Okay, now this one's a bit of a challenge for those who may not be, for the more the novice. What would this one return? You're sort of, you may be scratching your head. I don't know. Yeah, well, not quite nothing. I wish it would just return nothing, but actually what it returns is this little pesky pound NA. It's saying, ugh, Excel scratching its head and saying, not available. So that's pretty much what it returns. It's like an error message. So, okay, great. So I hope, certainly Asha, April, and Lois seem to have understood it, so I hope others are understanding it now. So how would you apply it, though? How, we understand now the functions, but how would it be applied? Well, you have one list. It could be on a worksheet. It could be in a separate file. But you have a list of your employees, and then you have another list of that has employee ID and salaries, and you can pull in the names by linking the IDs of the two lists. These could be in separate worksheets. They could even be in separate files as long as they're able to be communicated, at the same time, like a network drive or your own local drive. So that's essentially how you can apply lookup. So before we move on to setting up the files, does anybody have any burning questions? Nothing's been listed here, so I will move on. So the files, like I said, you can have multiple files, or you can have everything in one file with a bunch of worksheets, and especially now that with 2010, they really upped the number of worksheets you can have. We sort of did a combination. We did a lot of analysis separately in other files, but then we pulled everything together in one sort of master file. So our first worksheet was going to be our master list. And this has the order ID number, which is the identifier, the title, the renewal price, and the type of resource. Then we can create resource type worksheets by essentially copying the order numbers for one particular type of resource from the master list to the worksheet, and then use VLOOKUP in that resource type worksheet to get the title, the renewal price, and then we can add other data like the usage and the ratings. So here's more specifically what I'm talking about. This is our master list. So we start out with the order ID, always in the first column, and then the title and the type, and also the price. And the types we divide into 4 types. You can decide how to divide your resources up, but this is what we use. The resource type worksheets were easy to generate from there because all we did was we filtered the master list on type, we copied the order numbers, and then we pasted them in the resource type worksheet, in this case for e-journals. Now to use that VLOOKUP to get the title from the master list. So there's the function that we used in the first cell of the list. And here's the function wizard to help us understand what it means. And the lookup value is A2. The table array is our master list, the whole table. Notice the dollar signs so that all the references stay the same. The column index number is B2, because title is in column B, which is the second column. And there we have it. There's the e-journals. And if you use Excel's table formatting feature, it just plugs the same formula in the whole rest of the column, whole rest of the cells in that column. Very convenient. Now we can use VLOOKUP to get the price in our resource type worksheet. Similar, almost exactly the same thing, only we're in a different column and we're looking for a different, to return a different column. Lookup value is A2. Table array is the master list, and the prices this time is in column 4, is in the D column. And there it is, all the prices. Now you may wonder, why didn't we just copy and paste order number, title, and price from the master list all the way down and just copy and paste it into the resource type? Well, we did, actually. That's how we started out, and we ran into problems because we found some titles were incorrect. We found some prices were incorrect. And this is as close, this function is as close as Excel can get to a relational database where you store your data in one and only one place. And this way we could, once we realized our mistake and started using VLOOKUP, we realized we could make a change in the master list and it would be seen in every other reference that we pull the title in. So that's why this is a better method than simply copying and pasting the list, the whole list. So here is our resource type worksheet. We now have, here's the order number, all this data in the title and price. We're using VLOOKUP from the master list. Then we added usage data and calculated a cost per use. And now that can be viewed in the master list using VLOOKUP there. So this is a way you can get title and price from the master list to the resource type worksheets, as well as data and rankings, usage data and rankings, to the master list from the resource type worksheets. Any questions before I move on? Do both the files have to be open while you are working on them? If the files, if you're referencing files, yes. In fact, when you open up a file that has a VLOOKUP, it will prompt you, say, do you want to update? And I found, I'm still confused as to when Excel needs it to be open and when it doesn't, but I found it always works 100% when all the files are open. It only works about 15% of the time when some of the files are closed. So yes, the files need to be opened, and that's one reason why using one file for all the worksheets is better than using multiple files. So I hope, Leslie, I answered that question. Okay, so let's move on, thinking about comparing resources using percent rank. Like I said, we wanted to compare our resources against each other, primarily broken up by the type of resource, by the type of outcome. And that's because we knew it would be harder to compare a database to an e-journal. It's really pretty easy to do simply by sorting by some value that has a number, cost per use, usage, ratings, inflation, what have you. But when you do that, I've noticed that the distributions vary and are inconsistent. It's not a simple bell curve. It's almost always a very strange curve. And so it's hard to understand where one resource stacks up against another. And that's why percentiles can be very helpful. Percentiles, if you recall, when you were a kid and you got tested and it said you were in, or you had your GRE and you're in the 95th percentile or the 75th percentile, that means that you did better than 75% of the people who took the same test. So, you know, that's that describes how percentiles can help. Percent rank is the function that returns the rank of any one value as a percentage within a whole group. The .inc means inclusive, meaning the 0 and the 1 are included in the values. Parameters are 3. There are 3 parameters. Array, which is the column of interest that you want to evaluate. X, which is that particular value, where does that value fall within the array? And significance is merely the number of significant digits. How many digits past the decimal point do you want to see? So here's a simple example, %rank.inc, all of column E, X is E2, and 2 significant digits. That's what we did with the usage. We ranked the usage using %rank. You see it's column D is the array, X is that particular cell, and 2 digits past the decimal point. And we did it for all that entire column, and there is the distribution. You can see eJournal 9 is in the 3rd percentile. That means only 3% had lower usage than eJournal 9. Conversely, eJournal 4 was in the 95th percentile. So it had more usage than 95% of the eJournals. And you can compare the ranks of different measures for any one resource. So in this case, eJournal 120, its usage is right in the medians. It's in the 50th percentile for usage. But its cost per use is in the 80th percentile. And what that means is it's more expensive than cost per use than 80% of the resources in 80% of the eJournals. But that seems kind of conflicting. And it is because when measuring cost per use, we think lower is going to be better. So we want actually to see a lower rank, the lowest rank of CPUs. But in usage, higher is better. We want to see the top used, higher percentiles, which is something you really need to consider at the very beginning, and that is the direction of your comparisons. You need to decide, all the comparisons should be in the same direction. So you need to decide whether high is good and low is bad, or low is good and high is bad. It doesn't matter which, as long as you make a decision and you're consistent with it. You can reverse the directions of the ranks very easily when needed. And since we sort of intuitively think of higher as better, we decided to do that. So in this case, high use and ratings, high is better. But all the other criteria, low is better. So we had to transform cost, CPU, and inflation so that when they're ranked, they're all in the same direction. And transforming is really simple. For transforming ranks, all you have to do is subtract it from 1. So we took the percent rank for cost per use and subtracted it from 1. So 1 minus 0.8 equals 0.2. It's still in the 50th percentile for usage, but it's in the lowest 20 percentile for cost per use. It's the worst. So if you think lower is worst, it's in the 20th worst percentile. So any questions about that? I don't see anything new on the screen. Okay, so let's, I want to make sure we have enough time for questions at the end. And this is a method we started using this year. I'm sure many of you have heard a lot about how libraries are really, if you're not doing it yourself, are really starting to look at the value of packages. Admittedly, these packages did open up a lot of resources, a lot of journals to a lot of libraries, and that was good. But between the inflation and of these packages and the decrease in funding of libraries, it's really become totally unsustainable. So we needed a way to look at beyond at the effectiveness or the efficiency of big deals beyond simply total uses. The Pareto distribution is something that's been bandied about a lot. It was developed a long time ago and as a way of describing an economic phenomenon. And in the 60s, it sort of got a lot of attention by Trueswell and others who demonstrated that, about 80% of the usage is only coming from about 20% of the collection. This has been sort of debated a lot. Recently, OCLC did a study where it found only 6% provided about 80%. 6% of the collection provided about 80% of the usage. So, but it's a good way of demonstrating the spread of whatever you're looking at, in this case, the distribution of usage. And we wanted to see how efficient an eJournal package was. 80% of the usage is from what percent of the titles? We selected 20% just as a benchmark. It really wasn't founded on anything. But the goal was higher is better. So we just wanted to see. So it's really pretty easy to develop these calculations. First, you list the packages, you list the titles in the package. Then you gather the usage. And then you sort the titles by usage, in this case our 3-year average, Z to A, highest to lowest. And then you can calculate the two parts of the Pareto, the percentage of uses and the percentage of titles. The percentage of uses is the cumulative sum of uses divided by the total uses. So the easy way to do that is to use sum, of course, and just always start at the top cell and just add each cell onto it. And eventually you have a cumulative sum of uses divided by the total sum of uses, which is sum of all of column E. So if we applied this function, copied it and pasted it to the third row, it would read sum of E2 to E3 over sum of E, and on down the list. And then you locate the value closest to that target number, that 80% of usage. Then you can calculate the percentage of titles. It's a similar idea, only instead of sum, we're counting the number of titles. So the cumulative count of titles divided by the total count of titles. And again, we can use the same basic idea, only this time using count instead of sum. And then you read the value next to your benchmark percentage of uses. So that's what we did with this package. We, after sorting it from highest to lowest in terms of usage, we calculated the percentage of uses and the percentage of titles. Now what's interesting here, the most used title has over 17% of all uses out of this package. One title has over 17, almost 18% of uses. Something else interesting is that 20% of the titles account for nearly 2/3 of the uses. And then here's our Pareto distribution. 80% of the uses, you're never going to get exactly 80, or rarely get exactly 80 here. But 80, as close to 80 as you can see. 80% of the uses come from 28% of the titles. Well, that beats our benchmark. That's higher than our benchmark, so that's good. But where does it compare with the other packages? So we compared, this is the package spreadsheet, and we compared the Pareto number of all the packages. And they ranged from a low of 2%, although you can see that's an outlier. And you can also see that a large number of titles here, up to a high of 50%. Of course, these are very low number of titles, but you see. And the package we were looking at 28% is around the middle, maybe a little on the higher side. But still, this low, 2% of 1,249, that's about 25 titles out of over 1,200. That package has some real problems. Any questions on that, on the Pareto? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a way to make, it's not really a function, it's a feature of Excel. And conditional formatting, you may already be using this. I sort of only recently started using it the last year or two. And I found it to be a very nice way to highlight outliers and visually represent distributions. You can highlight a specific value, such as text, as in the word abstracts is green and FTDs is blue, and etc. Or you can highlight based on a certain value. Greater than 0.7 or 70% is green. Greater between 30 and 70% is yellow. And below 30% is red. Nice way to quickly see where things are. And you can also use it to visually represent distributions. It's sort of like a visualization of percentile rank. And that's what we did with cost per use. It's really pretty easy to do. You select the column that you want highlighted. You select conditional formatting from the ribbon and select the 3-color scale. In this case, we used red, yellow, and green. Red is highest is red and lowest is green. However, the default settings in Excel automatically assign only the highest and lowest to that nice solid color. Everything else in between is a gradation. But we know we really wanted to see the highest and lowest 10%. 10%. So you can change that by simply editing the rule. So here's an example. Again, here's the cost per use column. We highlighted it, selected conditional formatting from the home ribbon and color scales, and we selected the red to green color scale. And as you can see, there's a few greens and one kind of tingy red, but even this one isn't bright red. There's a lot in the middle in the yellows. So that's because it only highlights the highest and lowest in the solid colors. So changing the rule to show the percentiles, conditional formatting, manage rules, edit rule, and you just change this minimum from lowest to percentile. It automatically fills this value in. Then you change the maximum from highest to percentile. Again, it automatically fills it in. You don't have to change it if you don't want to. And hit OK. And wow, there's a lot more reds here now. So that's just a visual way. So now pulling it all together. So now we can look at, include in our master list summary columns from all these different worksheets by using VLOOKUP to grab that summary data from each of those resource type worksheets, data that could include the average uses, the cost per use, and the Pareto. And this is very helpful because very often I found I had to go in and change information. I found out, oh, this usage was based only on 2 years. I finally got the 3rd year in. Now I can add that to it. If I just used copied and paste the values, I would have been having to correct data all over again. And then I could use the conditional formatting to highlight important text and visualize distributions. So here's our compiled master list. This shows the data that was imported from the ILS. And here is all the data that we use VLOOKUP from each of the resource type worksheets. And for conditional formatting, we can visualize the use rank in 3 categories. Below 30% is red, between 30 and 70% is yellow, and above 70% is green. And you can't see that. Let me move it over. The cost per use rank is you use conditional formatting based on the 3-color scale. There are a few caveats I wanted to make sure you were aware of. One, like I said earlier, if you use Excel's table formatting, it can be very helpful. It's a bit of a pain sometimes because sometimes you don't want to automatically paste that formula in all the cells. More often than not, you usually do. So actually I found using table formatting much easier than plain old grid of worksheet. And another thing is don't rename your files. Just leave them as is because the references will not change. So if you change a file, if you move a file, and you have a VLOOKUP to that file, it's going to say, can't find it. So, and you have to change it. Save all your files in one folder enables you to preserve the relationships and the VLOOKUPs more easily. And I found it very much easier to use the same basic structure in all of the worksheets, at least as much as possible. So what I've hoped you've learned today is a way to to organize your data to use percent rank for ranking the items, conditional formatting for visualizing the data, and using the Pareto distributions for evaluating how good your packages are, how effective, how equitable the packages are. There's information here how to contact me. I have a blog. You can see my CV and other presentations. I did want to invite you to register anybody who's going to Charleston for the pre-conference workshop that I am involved in, Keeping It Real, a comprehensive and transparent evaluation of electronic resources. That's a mouthful, I know. This is a full-day interactive workshop where we bring to you our method of evaluating resources that's as transparent and as much based on value as evidence of value as possible. It will be interactive. It won't be a series of talking heads. You will be doing things. There will be some technical Excel work, not a lot. You will be working in groups, and will hopefully make it worth your time and the cost. So I wanted to plug that while I could. So now, to go to some questions. Have we figured out a way to use VLOOKUP to import in upcoming prices of journals? Gee, I wish I could do that. I tried to do that the other day from Excel, not Excel, EBSCOnet. I wanted to see all the Wileys and how much the price was. I need to work with EBSCO to find out how we can get those all at once. If the data is in your ILS already, yes, you can. But if it's like at EBSCOnet or some other vendor, that may not work. You're right. So this is not 100% slick. Not all the dots are connected. We still had to do a lot of tweaking, but I think this method really seemed to keep all our data much more organized than any other method we'd used before. So I'm hiding this, so I'm going to go over here. Are there any other questions? Ava put in the chat that about using ISSNs, that suggested using ISSNs. Yeah, if those work. We haven't found ISSNs to be very stable enough. They're better than ISBNs, I'll give you that. We used order record numbers because most of our data was coming there. I got to admit, it would have been easier to use ISSNs if we could match them with our JR1 reports. The trouble is, some reports use only print ISSNs, some use print and E, and I'm not sure we have that, have both in our ERM. Scott asked, do we continue to update our files with each new year? We haven't got that far. This is our first year doing it. So it will be interesting if when we reevaluate resources next year. We are changing our method, our collection development method. It's going to be much more evidence-based. Every year we're going to take a quick look, in fact, sometimes several times during the year, especially for monographs. But for e-journals, we will be looking at briefly at information like use and cost per use, but generally we're only going to reevaluate resources probably every 3 or 5 years. Excuse me. That OCLC study was just recent. I'd say no earlier than 2012. I can't remember, I cannot quote the source exactly, but it's one of those. They studied a number of libraries in the Ohio, maybe even Virginia area, I'm not sure. I hope somebody else can help fill in some knowledge gaps there. Well, again, I appreciate you joining me. I guess if there is no questions, oh, wait, there's one from, you will forgive me, I hope, if I do not try to mess up your name. But can you use these functions for different tabs in the same file? Yes, and that's actually more likely to not mess up if you use VLOOKUP for other worksheets or tabs in the same Excel file. So yes, you can do it there that way, or you can use VLOOKUP to look up data in a separate file, either way.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions? Well, thank you, Karen.
Well,
that was very interesting.
Thank you for allowing me to do this.
I'd also like to thank all of our attendees today. And it is going to switch back to my screen here. Great. We hope you found today's session useful. And shortly you'll be receiving an online evaluation form. As I said before, please do take a few minutes to respond to the questions and return the form to us. Your comments are very valuable and they help the ALCTS committee plan our new continuing education offerings. Information about all ALCTS webinars can be found on the ALCTS homepage at the URL on the screen. The upcoming webinars include sessions on institutional repositories and open access publishing, podcasts, and RDA relationships, the last of which will be presented in Spanish. Suggestions for webinars and other continuing education opportunities are welcome at any time. Please contact me at the email address on the screen, or you can submit a proposal for a webinar using the form at the URL also on the screen, which I will not attempt to read because it's really long. I would like to thank Eva Sorrell for providing technical support for today's webinar, and the support she and her colleagues on the Technical Support Subcommittee provide makes it possible for us to present these webinars smoothly. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll participate in other ALCTS continuing education offerings again in the future. Have a great day.